The Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Over 4,000 delegates from hundreds of species sat in their assigned seats, waiting for the session to begin. The massive chamber stretched upward for nearly a mile, with floating platforms carrying representatives from every corner of known space. Light from distant stars filtered through the crystalline dome above, casting rainbow patterns across the ancient stone floor. High Counselor Travax rose from his throne at the center of the hall. His insectoid body clicked and shifted as he prepared to speak. He had led this council for 60 years, and in all that time, he had never seen anything like what he was seeing now. The human delegation's platform was empty. Not a single human sat in the seats reserved for the United Earth Federation. Chairs stood untouched, the displays dark, the communication systems silent. In 300 years of human membership in the galactic community, their delegation had never missed a single session. Travax felt something cold move through his body. It was fear, though he did not recognize it at first. He had not felt fear in decades. Ambassador Yellen Sar of the Valorian Empire noticed the empty seats at the same moment. She stood from her own platform and stared across the vast chamber. Her silver eyes, which had seen countless diplomatic crises come and go, grew wide with confusion. She had shared dinner with Nathan Cole, the human ambassador, just 3 days ago. He had seemed tired, perhaps, but nothing more. He had smiled and told her stories about his grandchildren back on Earth. A junior aide rushed to Travax's side and whispered something in his ear. The High Counselor's antennae twitched violently. He raised one clawed hand, and the chamber's attention focused entirely on him. "We have received a message," Travax announced. His voice echoed through the hall, carried by ancient acoustic technology that predated most civilizations present. "It is from the human delegation. It was delivered to our systems 1 hour ago." He gestured, and a holographic projection flickered to life at the center of the chamber. The image showed a human male standing in a simple room. He wore no formal robes, no diplomatic insignia, just plain gray clothing. His face was calm, almost peaceful. It was Nathan Cole. To the esteemed members of the Galactic Council, the recording began. Nathan's voice was steady and clear. After 3 centuries of membership, the United Earth Federation has decided to withdraw from all galactic treaties, trade agreements, and mutual defense pacts. Effective immediately, human space is closed to all non-human vessels. We wish you no ill will. Simply no longer wish to participate. This decision is final. Thank you for the time we shared. Goodbye. The hologram vanished. For 17 seconds, no one in the chamber moved. No one spoke. No one even breathed among those species that required breathing. Then the screaming began. Delegates leaped from their seats. Platforms crashed into each other as representatives tried to reach the central floor. Voices in 1,000. Languages filled the air, translators struggling to keep up with the chaos. Yellen Sar found herself gripping the railing of her platform so hard that the metal bent beneath her fingers. "This is impossible," she whispered to herself. "This cannot be happening." But it was happening. As the minutes passed and the chaos grew, the true weight of the human announcement began to settle over the assembly like a dark cloud. The humans had been everywhere. They had spread through galactic society like water through sand, filling every gap, solving every problem, building every bridge. Human engineers maintained the great relay network that connected distant star systems. Human patrol ships kept the peace in 7 contested sectors. Human mediators resolved disputes that had lasted centuries. Human traders moved goods along routes that no other species dared to travel, and now they were gone. Military commander. Growth of the Keth Dominion pushed his way to the central floor. His massive armored body towered over most other delegates. His voice boomed across the chamber. "We must send a fleet immediately," he declared. "Humans cannot simply abandon their obligations. The treaties are clear. Unilateral withdrawal is forbidden." Senior diplomat Mira Voss of the Nexari Collective stepped forward. Her slender form and soft voice provided a sharp contrast to Groth's aggression. "The treaties forbid it, yes," she said calmly. "But tell me, Commander, who will enforce that clause? Who will fly to human space and demand they return?" Groth opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. He had fought alongside humans once, during the border wars 30 years ago. He had seen what a single human soldier could do when pushed to the limit. He had watched human ships fly directly into enemy fire, taking damage that would have destroyed any other vessel, and keep fighting anyway. "They will not comply with force," Yelensar said, joining the conversation. "I have known Nathan Cole for 40 years. He's not a man who makes empty gestures. If he says the decision is final, then it is final." High Counselor Trevax finally restored enough order to call an emergency session. Delegates were directed to their seats. Security drones moved through the chamber, calming the most agitated representatives. Within an hour, something resembling normal proceedings had resumed, but nothing was normal. Everyone knew it. Everyone felt it. Elder statesman Torvax Bryn of the Drath Consortium requested permission to speak. At nearly 300 years old, he was among the oldest living beings in the chamber. He had been present when humanity first made contact with the galactic community, when their primitive ships had stumbled into Drath space, and everything had changed. He rose slowly from his seat, and the chamber fell silent out of respect. "I remember the day we found them," Torvax Bryn said. His voice was thin with age, but still carried across the vast hall. "They came to us in vessels held together by primitive alloys and desperate hope. We looked at them and saw children, newcomers, a young species just learning to walk among the stars. We welcomed them. We taught them. We believed we were being generous." He paused and looked around the chamber at the thousands of frightened faces staring back at him. "We never asked ourselves a simple question. What kind of species builds starships before they have achieved peace on their own world? What kind of beings reach for the stars while still fighting wars among themselves? We called it primitive. We called it foolish. Perhaps we should have called it something else." "What?" Trevax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Torvax Bryn's ancient eyes seemed to look through the walls of the chamber, through the station, through space itself, toward the distant region where humanity now sat in silence. "Hunger," he said. "The humans were always hungry. For knowledge, for growth, for something more. We thought we satisfied that hunger by including them in our society. We thought they had become content." He shook his head slowly. "We were wrong. And now they have decided to feed that hunger somewhere we cannot follow. Oh, I do not know what they are building behind those closed borders, but I know this much. When they return, and they will return, we will not recognize them. And they may not recognize us as anything worth keeping." The chamber remained silent long after he finished speaking. Outside, in the cold void between stars, the borders of human space had already closed. For the first time in 300 years, the galaxy would have to survive without humanity, and no one knew if it could. The first war began 6 months after the humans left. It started over a trade route. The Drift Corridor had been the most important shipping lane in the Western Spiral Arm for over 1,000 years. Goods worth trillions of credits passed through it every single day, and for the last 2 centuries, human patrol ships had kept it safe. Now those ships were gone, and everyone wanted to fill the void. The Valorian Empire moved first. Admiral Kethvorn deployed his fastest cruisers to the corridor's entry points within weeks of the human withdrawal. He claimed it was for protection. He said the Empire only wanted to maintain order during a difficult transition. No one believed him. The Keth Dominion responded by sending their own fleet. Commander Groth personally led the expedition, his massive warship cutting through space like a blade through silk. He positioned his forces directly across from the Valorian ships and waited for 3 months. The 2 fleets stared at each other across empty space. Diplomats rushed back and forth between them, trying to prevent what everyone knew was coming. Ambassador Yelensar worked without sleep for weeks, drafting treaties and proposals and compromises that no one wanted to accept. Then a Valorian captain made a mistake. The ship drifted too close to a Keth patrol vessel. Weapons were fired. Within hours, both fleets were engaged in full combat. The Battle of the Drift Corridor lasted 11 days. When it ended, over 300 ships had been destroyed. 40,000 beings had died. The trade route itself had been so badly damaged by weapons fire that it would take years to repair. Both sides claimed victory. Both sides were lying. High Counselor Trevax called an emergency summit to address the crisis. Delegates gathered once again in the Grand Assembly Hall, their faces marked by exhaustion and fear. The empty human seats seemed to mock them from across the chamber. "This is exactly what the humans wanted," Commander Groth declared, his voice filled with bitter anger. "They knew this would happen. They left us to destroy ourselves." "Perhaps," Mira Voss of the Nexari Collective replied calmly. "Perhaps they simply stopped caring what we did to each other. I am not certain which possibility frightens me more." The economic collapse came next. The Drath Consortium had built their entire civilization around trade. They had no military to speak of, no great fleets or armies. Their power came from commerce, from the endless flow of goods and services that moved through their networks. And much of that flow had depended on human infrastructure. Within a year of the withdrawal, 17 of their major trading partners had defaulted on their obligations. Credit systems that had functioned smoothly for centuries began to break down. Prices for basic goods increased by factors of 10, then 20, then 100. Elder statesman Torvax Bren watched his people's prosperity crumble around him. He had warned them. He had told them what was coming, but no one had listened. "We built our house on human foundations," he said to the consortium's ruling council. "We never thought to ask what would happen if those foundations were removed. Now we know." Refugees began to appear at the borders of the wealthier systems. Millions of beings from collapsed economies fled their homes, searching for safety and food and hope. Some were welcomed. Most were not. The Nexari Collective sealed their borders entirely. Their analysts had calculated exactly how many refugees their systems could support, and that number was 0. Anyone who tried to enter illegally was turned back by force. The Valorian Empire took a different approach. They accepted refugees freely, then put them to work in their military factories. The Empire's fleet had been badly damaged in the Drift Corridor battle, and they needed workers to rebuild it. The refugees had no choice but to accept. Ambassador Yellen Sar resigned her position in protest. She had served the Empire for over a century, but she could not support what her government was doing. She retreated to a small colony world on the Empire's edge, and refused all contact with the outside galaxy. More wars followed the first. Small conflicts at first. Border skirmishes and territorial disputes that would have been resolved peacefully when human mediators were available. Now there were no mediators. Now there was only force. The relay network began to fail. Human engineers had maintained the great communication stations that linked distant star systems together. Without them, the ancient technology started to break down. One by one, relay stations went dark. Messages that once traveled across the galaxy in seconds now took days or weeks to arrive. Isolation spread like a disease. Systems that had been connected for millennia found themselves alone. Governments lost contact with their colonies. Families were separated by light years with no way to reach each other. Senior analyst Dren Morrow of the Nexori Collective compiled a report on the state of the galaxy 2 years after the human withdrawal. The document was classified at the highest level. Only a handful of beings ever read it. The report concluded that galactic civilization, as it had existed for millions of years, was dying. Not quickly, not dramatically, but steadily and certainly, like a patient with a terminal illness. The connections that had held everything together were breaking. The systems that had maintained order were failing. The peace that had lasted for so long was already a memory. "We did not realize how much we depended on them," Dren Morrow wrote in his conclusion. "We thought they were partners. Junior partners, perhaps, but partners nonetheless. We were wrong. They were the foundation. They were the glue. They were the thing that made everything else possible. And now they are gone." Some species tried to reach human space. Scout ships were sent to the closed borders, carrying messages of peace and requests for communication. None of them returned. The ships simply vanished the moment they crossed into human territory. Rumors began to spread. Some said the humans were dead, wiped out by some terrible disaster of their own making. Others said they had evolved into something beyond physical form, ascending to a higher plane of existence. Still others whispered that they were building weapons, terrible weapons that would be used to conquer the entire galaxy. No one knew the truth. No one could know. The borders remained sealed, the silence remained absolute, and the galaxy continued to tear itself apart. 3 years after the withdrawal, High Counselor Trevak stood alone in the empty Grand Assembly Hall. Most delegates had stopped attending sessions. There was no point anymore. The Council had no power to enforce its decisions, no ability to maintain peace, no purpose. He looked at the human seats, still empty after all this time. He had ordered them preserved exactly as they had been left, as a reminder and perhaps as a hope. Why? He whispered into the darkness. Why did you leave us? The silence offered no answer. It never did. And somewhere beyond the sealed borders, humanity continued whatever great work they had begun, indifferent to the chaos they had left behind. The galaxy burned, and the humans did not care. 10 years had passed since the humans walked away. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Empires that had stood for thousands of years had fallen. New powers had risen from the ashes of the old. Borders had been redrawn 100 times over. And through it all, human space remained silent. Yellen Sar lived alone now on a small moon at the edge of what had once been Valorian territory. The empire she had served no longer existed. Civil war had torn it apart 5 years ago, splitting it into a dozen smaller nations that spent more time fighting each other than building anything new. She spent her days in a small garden, growing vegetables and flowers and trying not to think about everything she had lost. At night, she looked up at the stars and wondered where Nathan Cole was. She wondered if he was still alive. She wondered if he ever thought about her. A ship appeared in her sky one morning. It was small, battered, clearly held together by hope and desperation. It landed in the field near her home, and a young Nexari female stepped out. Her name was Azasis Siraven. She had been a junior analyst in the collective before its government collapsed. Now she traveled the galaxy, gathering information, trying to understand what had happened and what might happen next. I have been looking for you, Sira, told the old ambassador. You knew the humans better than almost anyone. I need to ask you questions. Yellen Sar invited her inside. They sat at a simple wooden table, drinking tea made from local herbs. Outside, the wind moved through the garden, carrying the scent of flowers. Everyone has questions about the humans, Yellen Sar said. No one has answers. I have been to the border, Sira replied. I did not cross it, but I watched. I scanned. I gathered every piece of data I could find. The old ambassador leaned forward. And what did you learn? Sira's face was troubled. Nothing. That is what frightens me. There is no radio traffic, no energy signatures, no movement of any kind. It is as if human space has become empty, dead. Yellen Sar shook her head slowly. They are not dead. I am certain of that. Whatever the humans are doing, they are doing it quietly. They have always been good at keeping secrets when they wanted to. But why? What could possibly require 10 years of complete isolation? The old ambassador looked out the window at the distant stars. Somewhere among them lay Earth, the human homeworld. She had visited it once, long ago. She remembered blue oceans and green forests and cities that stretched toward the sky. She remembered the energy of the place, the constant motion, the feeling that anything was possible. The humans were never satisfied, she said quietly. That was the thing about them. No matter what they achieved, they always wanted more. They built ships that could cross the galaxy, and then they wanted ships that could cross faster. They cured diseases that had killed millions, and then they wanted to cure death itself. They were always reaching, always striving, always hungry for the next challenge. She turned back to face Sira. I think they looked at us. At our galaxy, at everything we had built over millions of years, and they decided it was not enough. They wanted something more, something we could not give them, something they had to build themselves. Sira considered this for a long moment. The other species believe they are building weapons. They think the humans will return with fleets large enough to conquer everything. But I do not think so. Nathan Cole was not a conqueror. He was a builder. Whatever the humans are creating, I believe it is something new. Something we have never seen before. News arrived 3 days later that changed everything. A probe had been sent into human space by a coalition of surviving governments. It was unmanned, equipped with the best sensors and recording devices available. It had been programmed to travel deep into human territory, gather information. In return, the probe had returned. Sira and Yelen Sar traveled together to the station where the probe's data was being analyzed. Scientists and diplomats from a dozen species had gathered there, all desperate to finally learn what was happening behind the sealed borders. The probe's recordings showed empty space. Star after star, system after system, all abandoned. Human colonies that had once held billions of people were dark and silent. Ships floated in orbit around dead worlds, their crews long gone. But the probe had continued deeper, and at the edge of human core territory, it had found something else. A structure. Massive beyond comprehension. It surrounded an entire star, capturing all of its energy, channeling it toward purposes no one could understand. The probe's sensors had been overwhelmed by the readings. Power levels that should have been impossible. Energy patterns that did not match anything in any database. And there was movement around the structure. Ships, but not like any ships the galaxy had ever seen. They did not fly through space. They seemed to fold it, appearing and disappearing without crossing the distance between points. "They have built a Dyson sphere," one of the scientists whispered, his voice filled with awe and terror. "But the technology around it, the ships, they are beyond anything we thought possible. They have advanced more in 10 years than we have in 10,000. Yelensar stared at the images on the screen. She thought about Nathan Cole, about his calm face in that final holographic message. She thought about everything he had said and everything he had not said. "No, they did not leave because they hated us," she said softly. "They left because we were holding them back. We were anchors, keeping them tied to a level of development they had outgrown. They needed to be free of us to become what they truly could be." Sira Ven stood beside her, trembling slightly. "What do we do now? How do we respond to this?" The old ambassador had no answer. None of them did. The probe had carried a message into human space, a simple request for communication, for dialogue, for any sign that the humans still remembered their former partners. The probe had returned with no response. The silence continued, but now the silence felt different. It was no longer the silence of absence. It was the silence of something vast and powerful, watching and waiting. The humans had not disappeared. They had transformed, and when they finally chose to speak again, the galaxy would have no choice but to listen. Yelen Sar returned to her garden on the distant moon. She planted new seeds and tended her flowers and waited. She was old now, very old. She did not know if she would live long enough to see what came next, but she hoped she would. Because whatever the humans had become, she wanted to understand it. She wanted to see Nathan Cole one more time and ask him the question that had haunted her for 10 long years. Was it worth it? Was leaving us behind worth what you have gained? The stars offered no answer. But somewhere in the silence, humanity continued its great work. And the galaxy could only watch and wait and wonder. The ship appeared without. Warning at the galactic core, it did not travel through space like normal vessels. One moment there was nothing. The next moment it was there, hanging in the void, like it had always existed. Sensors across 100 systems detected its arrival simultaneously. Alarms rang out on stations and planets throughout the galaxy. The ship was unlike anything anyone had ever seen. It was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at, its surface flowing and shifting like liquid metal catching starlight. It was not large by warship standards, perhaps the size of a small frigate. But the energy readings coming from it suggested power beyond anything the combined fleets of the galaxy could produce. It was human emergency. Communications flooded every channel. Governments that had not spoken to each other in years suddenly found reasons to cooperate. Within hours, a delegation had been assembled from the surviving powers. They traveled to the galactic core aboard the fastest ships available, desperate to make contact before the human vessel disappeared again. Yelen Sar was among them. She was very old now, her silver eyes dimmed by age, her body weakened by time. But when word had come of the human ship, she had demanded to be included. No one had the heart to refuse her. Sira Ven came as well, serving as the official representative of what remained of the Nexari collective. She helped the old ambassador walk through the corridors of their transport ship, supporting her when her legs grew tired. "Are you afraid?" Sira asked as they approached the meeting point. The Lensar considered the question carefully. "No. I have spent 15 years being afraid. I'm tired of it. Now I only want answers." The delegation's ships gathered at a safe distance from the human vessel. For several hours, nothing happened. The human ship simply floated in space, silent and still. Then, without any signal or warning, a section of its hull opened and a smaller craft emerged. It flew toward the delegation's flagship, moving with impossible grace. When it landed in the docking bay, everyone present held their breath. The craft's door opened. A man stepped out. He looked young, perhaps 30 years old by human standards. He wore simple gray clothing, much like Nathan Cole had worn in his final message so long ago. His eyes were calm, his expression peaceful. He looked at the gathered delegates with something that might have been curiosity, or might have been amusement. "My name is Daniel Shaw," he said. His voice was quiet, but carried clearly through the bay. "I have been sent to deliver a message and an invitation." Yalan Sar pushed forward through the crowd. Guards tried to stop her, but she waved them away with surprising strength. She stood before the human, looking up at his young face. "Where is Nathan Cole?" she asked. "Is he still alive?" Daniel Shaw smiled gently. "Ambassador Sar, he told me you might ask that. Yes, he is alive. He asked me to give you his regards and his apologies. He wanted to come himself, but his work would not allow it." "His work? What work? What have you been doing all these years?" The young human looked past her at the assembled delegates. Representatives from species that had once ruled vast empires now stood crowded together in a single room, waiting for his words. The balance of power had shifted so completely that no one even thought to protest. "We left because we had to," Daniel Shaw began. "Not because we hated you or wanted to hurt you, but because we had reached the limits of what we could become while remaining part of your society. Your rules, your treaties, your way of doing things, they were designed for stability, for maintaining what already existed. We needed something different. We needed room to grow." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "In the 15 years since we closed our borders, we have changed. Our technology has advanced beyond anything you can currently imagine. We have solved problems that your scientists believed were unsolvable. We have built things that your engineers would call impossible, and we have done it by freeing ourselves from the constraints that held us back." Commander Groth of what remained of the Keth Dominion stepped forward. His body was scarred from years of warfare, his eyes hard with suspicion. "And now you return. With your impossible ships and your advanced technology, have you come to conquer us? To rule over the ashes of the civilization you abandoned?" Daniel Shaw looked at him with something like sadness. "No, Commander. We have not come to conquer. We have come to offer a choice." He raised his hand, and a holographic display appeared in the air above them. It showed the galaxy, but not as they knew it. New structures dotted the map, vast engineering projects that spanned entire star systems. Networks of energy flowed between them, connecting everything in ways that seemed to defy physics. "This is what we have built," Daniel Shaw said. "A new foundation for civilization. Clean energy for every world that wants it. Transportation networks that can move people and goods across the galaxy in moments instead of months. Medical technology that can cure any disease, repair any injury, extend life far beyond its natural limits. We have created abundance beyond anything your histories have ever recorded." The delegates stared at the display in stunned silence. "And we are offering to share it," Daniel Shaw continued. "That is our invitation. Any species that wishes to join us may do so. We will provide the technology, the knowledge, the resources. We will help you rebuild what has been lost and create something far greater than what existed before." "What is the cost? What do you want in return?" Daniel Shaw's expression grew serious. "Only one thing. Those who join us must accept change. Real change. The old ways of doing things, the treaties and hierarchies and power structures that defined your civilization, they cannot continue. They were built on scarcity and fear. We are offering abundance and hope. But you cannot have both. You must choose. The chamber erupted in argument. Some delegates shouted in anger, calling the offer an insult or a trap. Others begged for more information, desperate to understand what they were being offered. A few simply stood in silence, overwhelmed by everything they had heard. Yellen Sar remained standing before Daniel Shaw, her old eyes fixed on his young face. "Nathan knew this would happen," she said quietly. "He knew you would return eventually. He knew what you would offer. He planned for this from the beginning. The withdrawal, the silence, the transformation, it was all necessary. We had to prove what was possible before we could offer it to others. We had to become something new before we could help anyone else change." The old ambassador nodded slowly. She had known Nathan Cole for over 50 years. She understood now what he had been doing all along. He had not abandoned the galaxy. He had been preparing to save it. "I have one more question," she said. "Ask it, if we refuse your offer. If we choose to continue as we are, what will you do?" Daniel Shaw's expression did not change. "Then we will leave again. We will not force anyone to accept our help, but we will not wait forever either. The universe is vast, Ambassador Sar, and we have only begun to explore it." He turned and walked back toward his craft. At the door, he paused and looked back at the gathered delegates one final time. "You have 1 year to decide. Use the time wisely." The craft rose and flew back to the human ship. Moments later, both vessels vanished, folding away into nothing as quickly as they had appeared. The galaxy had been given a choice, and everything depended on the answer. The year passed faster than anyone expected. Debates raged across every world and station in the galaxy. Governments argued. Citizens protested. Religious leaders proclaimed the human offer was either salvation or damnation, depending on who was speaking. Old enemies found themselves agreeing for the first time in centuries. Old allies discovered they had nothing left in common. Yellen Sar spent the year traveling. Despite her age, despite her weakness, she visited world after world, speaking to anyone who would listen. She told them about the human she had known. She told them about Nathan Cole and his quiet determination. She told them that change was frightening, but stagnation was death. Some listened. Many did not. Siraven traveled with her, recording everything, documenting the great debate that would determine the future of galactic civilization. She watched the old ambassador give the same speech 100 times, adjusting her words for each audience but never changing her message. "We made a mistake," Yellen Sar would say. "We thought the humans needed us. We thought we were teaching them, guiding them, helping them grow. But they were never our students. They were our mirror. They showed us what we could become if we had the courage to try. And we were too afraid to look." The deadline arrived on a cold morning in the Galactic Standard Calendar. Representatives from every surviving government gathered once again at the galactic core. The human ship appeared exactly as it had 1 year before, folding into existence without warning or fanfare. Daniel Shaw emerged and walked to the meeting chamber where the delegates waited. He stood before them in silence. Waiting for their answer, High Counselor Travax, still clinging to his title despite the council having lost all real power years ago, stepped forward to speak for the assembly. "We have debated your offer," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "We have argued and fought and nearly destroyed ourselves again, trying to reach a decision. In the end, we could not agree. Some of us wish to accept. Others wish to refuse. We are divided, as we have always been divided." Daniel Shaw nodded slowly. "Then those who wish to accept may come with us. Those who wish to refuse may remain. We will not force unity where none exists." As the chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted at each other, accusations flying back and forth. Guards had to separate representatives who came to blows. It was everything that had gone wrong with galactic civilization, compressed into a single moment. Through it all, Daniel Shaw simply waited. When the noise finally died down, roughly half the delegates had moved to one side of the chamber. They represented species and governments that had chosen to accept the human offer. The other half remained where they were, committed to refusing. Yellen Sar stood with those who had accepted. Sira Ven stood beside her. Commander Groth remained with those who refused. His scarred face was set in stubborn determination. "We will not surrender our identity," he declared. "We will not become puppets of human masters. We have survived for millions of years without you. We will survive millions more." Daniel Shaw looked at him without anger or judgment. "That is your choice, Commander. We respect it. But understand what you are choosing. We will share our technology only with those who join us. We will not trade or negotiate or maintain relations with those who refuse. You will be on your own, as you were before we returned." "Accept that," Groth replied. The division was complete. Half the galaxy would go with the humans into an unknown future. The other half would remain behind, clinging to the old ways. Daniel Shaw led those who had accepted 2 waiting transport vessels. Yellen Sar walked slowly, her body tired, but her spirit lighter than it had been in years. As she approached the human ship, a figure emerged from within. It was Nathan Cole. He looked older than she remembered, but not as old as he should have been. The human technology had changed him, extended his life far beyond natural limits. His eyes were the same, though. Kind and thoughtful, and always looking toward something distant. "Yellen," he said softly, "I hoped you would come." She stopped before him, looking up at the face of her old friend. Tears formed in her silver eyes for the first time in decades. "You left without saying goodbye," she said. "I never understood why." Nathan Cole took her hands in his. "Because if I had told you what we were planning, you would have tried to stop us. Or you would have wanted to come with us before we were ready. I needed you here, Yellen. I needed someone who understood us to speak for us when we returned. You planned all of this, from the very beginning, at all of it. I could not have predicted the wars or the collapse or the suffering, but I knew that change would be painful. Real change always is. I am sorry for the pain we caused, but I am not sorry for what we have become." He guided her into the ship, and she saw for the first time what humanity had built. The interior was vast, far larger than the outside suggested. Technology she could not understand lined the walls, flowing and shifting like living things. Humans moved through the corridors, but they were different now. Some had modified their bodies in ways that seemed impossible. Others existed as patterns of light, having transcended physical form entirely. All of them radiated a peace and purpose she had never seen in any species. "What are you now?" she whispered. Nathan Cole smiled. "We are still human, just more than we were before. We found a way to combine technology and biology, matter and energy, individual and collective. We are still ourselves, still unique, still free. But we are also connected in ways that eliminate loneliness and fear and misunderstanding. We have not lost our humanity, Yellen. We have finally found it." The ships carrying those who had accepted lifted away from the galactic core. Behind them, half the galaxy remained, choosing to continue on their familiar path. Ahead lay something entirely new. Yellen Sar stood at a viewing window, watching the stars stream past as the human ship carried them toward the future. Sira Ven stood beside her, young and frightened and hopeful all at once. "Do you think we made the right choice?" Sira asked. The old ambassador considered the question. She thought about everything she had seen in her long life. The wars and the peace, the suffering and the joy, the endless cycle of rise and fall that had defined galactic civilization for millions of years. "I do not know if it is the right choice," she said finally. "But I know it is a different choice, and sometimes different is enough." The ship folded through space, crossing distances that should have taken centuries in mere moments. Around them, humanity's great works spread across the galaxy, waiting to be shared with all who came seeking something better. The humans had walked away 15 years ago. Now they had returned not as conquerors or masters, but as builders of a new path. Those who followed them would be changed forever. Those who refused would continue as they always had, and the galaxy, divided but surviving, moved forward into an uncertain but wondrous future. Yellen Sar closed her eyes and smiled. Somewhere nearby, Nathan Cole was working on his next project, his next dream, his next impossible achievement. Some things never changed, and some things changed everything.